Being as objective as I can possibly be, I think most Tarantino films are just fine. I'm not a filmmaker, obviously, and I'm not trying to be this contrarian to films that are really loved by so many people. This channel is meant to be an endorsement for films I find interesting or intriguing, and to Tarantino's credit, his films are entertaining. Nobody can argue that. But the absolute worship he has perplexes me a little bit. It's like bros who take on his fanhood as a personality trait, and it's weird to me. With that being said, Pulp Fiction deserves all of the credit given to it. I'll try to explain why I have such a reverence for it, but again, to Tarantino's credit, it is difficult to explain how good it is because what makes Pulp Fiction phenomenal is kind of a sentiment, like an attitude. Describing what makes it good is like trying to describe a color. The first thing that comes to mind is the way that the plot is unveiled without chronological order or forced exposition. That is one element of Pulp Fiction that makes it unique, but the meandering plot is also second fiddle to the dialogue itself. The conversations in Pulp Fiction are authentic, making them refreshing in a way because they aren't constantly trying to fill in exposition or inform the audience. The characters don't care about that. The plot itself is like a shade of the backdrop that arrives on its own schedule, regardless of the typical conventions of storytelling in film that coincide with the passage of time or what the audience is expecting. What does seem to move with some sort of structure or theme is the dialogue. The dialogue enriches the scenes that follow because it gives us this tiny window into the lives of the characters, and while it is sometimes unrelated to the situation, if not comical in context to the situation, it is not arbitrary. The dialogue informs the audience on the characters' interests, proclivities, and intentions, like when Jules and Vincent are talking about Marcellus Wallace having someone thrown out of a window for giving his wife a foot massage, just before confronting the college guys who stole from him, only for Vincent to take his wife out on a date in the following scene. The dialogue lets us in on something deeper below the topical meanderings of these characters' actions, like the short exchange between Butch and Vincent in the bar. I've always wondered if Butch and Vincent almost got into it because Vincent knows Butch is throwing the fight, alluding to a nobility in Vincent, a code, or more specifically, a pride. I wonder about the backstory of the couple we see holding up the diner at the beginning and end of the film. I wonder about Butch and Fabian when they are talking about potbellies and attraction. That veiled understanding of the characters and the dialogue they have back and forth is something Pulp Fiction does really well because it makes it feel authentic, and that authenticity makes the audience curious about the details of a world we are suddenly dropped into because we are getting to know each character through osmosis. The subtle mysteries of Pulp Fiction draw the audience in, and dialogue gives us the clues, even if we don't learn the specifics, like the contents of the briefcase, Jules' reaction after Vincent dies, Marcellus after the incident occurs in the pawn shop. The characters themselves are fully realized in this bubble where we watch the events unfold intermittently, like they are captive to their fates regardless of when the audience is watching. As for a point or a statement, I don't think there is one within the story itself, which is part and parcel to what Pulp Fiction implies. The stories we consume and the fiction we absorb depend entirely on the characters themselves, regardless of the plot, how it's unveiled, expositionless dialogue, or whether or not there's a grandiose narrative behind the film. The title Pulp Fiction represents that ironic duality, being a term for a dime a dozen paperbacks sold in magazines and drugstores, insinuating that there is nothing unique to the plot itself, and the appeal really relies entirely on who these people are. Despite the work having the typical characters of Pulp Fiction paperbacks, referenced again by the title, like drug dealers, hitmen, boxers, and sex workers, that doesn't impede the characters themselves from being emotionally layered, complex, and thoughtful, which is ultimately how an audience connects with whatever story is being told. Pulp Fiction has a couple vague themes in the way James Joyce's Dubliners does. Pulp Fictions are pride and redemption, in my opinion, like Jules having a revelation after almost getting shot, Vincent resuscitating Marcellus Wallace's wife, Butch betting on himself after agreeing to throw the fight, then risking everything to get his watch back, and counterintuitively saving Marcellus after they're trying to kill each other. There are more examples too, but if there is one theme I could find in Pulp Fiction, it is how these forces, pride and redemption, are entirely subjective. Marcellus calls the dogs off Butch. Jules spares the couple after explaining his revelation with the college students. Marcellus Wallace's wife survives because a drug dealer saves her. Jules has a divine revelation after a near-death experience, and Vincent, loyal to this code, ultimately dies. All of these elements of Pulp Fiction establish the complete original tone of the film. I can't do it justice, but it's kind of like when you pick out a musician just from how they play. Pulp Fiction has a unique style that exists in the expressions and actions of each character, the sincere dialogue, the scattered unveiling of the plot, and the original cinematography. The conclusion of the film leaves you wanting more. Jules brings the audience even deeper into the world with a final monologue that roots his own redemptive path to a Christian-sounding speech that is almost word-for-word identical to a creed that appears at the beginning of a 1976 Japanese film starring Sonny Shiba called Karate Kiba.
You read the Bible, Ringo?
Not regularly, no.
Well, there's this passage I got memorized. Ezekiel 25:17. The path of the righteous man is beset on all sides by the iniquities of the selfish and the tyranny of evil men. Blessed is he who in the name of charity and goodwill shepherds the weak through the valley of darkness, for he is truly his brother's keeper and the finder of lost children. And I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger those who attempt to poison and destroy my brothers. And you will know I am the Lord when I lay my vengeance upon you.
And defender is beset on all sides by the iniquity of selfish and the tyranny of evil men. Blessed is he who in the name of charity and goodwill shepherds the weak through the valley of darkness, for he is truly his brother's keeper and the father of lost children. And I will execute great vengeance upon them with furious anger, who poison and destroy my brothers. And they shall know that I am Chiba, the bodyguard, when I shall lay my vengeance upon them.
And forming a depth to the psyche that validates all of these characters' actions, motives, and morals. We are only just getting to know the God they pray to. Jules' view of himself as the shepherd is a tip of the iceberg moment for the audience, a beacon to remind us, just before the film ends, that it is the characters themselves, not necessarily the meandering plot, that allows for that depth. And it doesn't even matter that some of the mysteries of the film are ultimately left unanswered. There's no film like Pulp Fiction in that way.